yesterday was UFC Baku, but obviously not the biggest story of the weekend, which, we could we could definitely say a lot about that. Jon Jones retired, which is the huge news of the day, which we'll get into, but it is kind of crazy that like there was a pretty good UFC fight card that was on, and like all the momentum and storylines have nothing to do with it. Like we're only going to be talking about Jon Jones.
And that has a lot of negative to do with Jon Jones. Obviously, Jon Jones is public enemy number one right now in the UFC space, but the UFC themselves just not pushing a card going all the way to Baku, where you have a guy like Rafael Fiziev fighting in front of the home crowd
And
and the
they've never
co-main.
even been there before. Like they could have hyped up the fact that this is their first time going there way more than
It's
they did.
almost like if you weren't such a hip UFC fan that pays attention to what's coming up and what the fights are for the week, it would be like a PFL or a Bellator thing. Like you just found out last second that this was happening. Like yeah, we're going to a place they've never been before, and we've got this two light heavyweight contenders in the main event, and
Both strikers too, like a really fun fight, and even the co-main with Fiziev and
and
behind
that
us.
that is the big issue that I'd like to start off this podcast with, because we would make time to talk about this card in depth if even if Jon Jones still did retire, we would still make time to talk about this card. But the fact that that's not the most important thing, and the fact that the card really just came and went, another UFC card that just comes and goes in the year 2025, just really like puts that damper on the fact that, man, why is all the talk centered around a guy that's, yes, the greatest of all time, of course, the heavyweight champion. He's going to be talked about, but when he's exclusively the only thing being talked about, and it's almost like the actual fight cards, the fighters, active fighters themselves, are being put secondary. It just feels like we're in a time right now where just, it's almost like what happens in the octagon is second, and like, no, what are the big storylines outside of the octagon, and like rumors and whatnot. And
Well, right now they're just like a lot of these times, we talk about them not doing a good job really anymore of like building some of these fight nights. You know, there really aren't any storylines, and that's kind of like a problem in my opinion because obviously hardcore fans like us and a lot of the people watching, like they all agree, like a fight's a fight. If you're a fight fan, you like watching fights. It doesn't matter how well they hype it up. But like
like
to the casual fan,
once the
you have
card gets going on Saturday night, I feel like, okay,
yeah, I'm in. Like I'm
people
all
are
in.
tuned in, like, that the card's happening, and you're gonna get good fights regardless. But
Yeah, like this has
when
nothing
they
to do with like the
happen,
quality of fights or anything like that. Like it should be clear. Like it's really just the
this has nothing
promotional
to do
side of
with
it.
matchmaking. But we've talked a million times on end about how good the match in the UFC is, way above the rest when it comes to matchmaking and making the use of their roster when it comes to the fights that should be happening, and the fights that the fans want to see, of course, too. Um, it is just the fact that it's like, hey, like, man, this is something that I want to be going back and forth with about the entire week. Like, man, like, this is such a close call. It's like, is this guy gonna win the fight, or is this guy, like, just straight up, all you can really consume yourself with is the fight night card coming up, instead of once it's Saturday and the fights are already happening. It's like, and then they happen. It's like you enjoyed it, but it's like, well, just came and went. Like it didn't feel it didn't feel like as important as all these fights are going to be important regardless. They wouldn't be making these fights if they just it's like, okay, like, we have to do a card. Let's just put some random fight on there. That's the
That's
other
the Apex model.
That's the Apex model.
That's what
Because
they
of
do
the
with UFC
Apex
Apex.
model, because of the ESPN deal and how many fights they actually have to put on, that does water down a lot of other cards, and
Yeah.
that's
And
just
that's the
not fair.
argument too, because like you talk to different fans from different eras, and everybody has a different opinion on it. Because you think about like the old school fans like from Spike, they grew up watching the UFC when it was pretty much like you were having a card every couple of months, and so like they all felt big, but you always wanted more fights. And then
Yeah,
like
car. Every couple of months, they're traveling somewhere. There's always gonna
yeah.
be a live crowd, and
And like at the end, I should say like that's not even the UFC's fault. Like if anything, they should sign just a better deal
no,
maybe.
yeah,
But
exactly.
it's just because like ESPN, I think they what is it? It's like 41
It's
or
kind of like
42 cards a year.
forced them to
Right.
just, yeah, we have to do all these Apex cards, you know.
And the thing is, like I don't know, because it sucks because everybody wanted more fights, and like now that we have more fights, we're kind of seeing that oversaturation and the downside of it, which has kind of dulled some of these bigger fight nights or what should be bigger fight nights. And I just think that's a promotional issue. I think if ESPN or the UFC did a better job at like kind of pushing the fighters that are in these big spots, even if it's not a pay per view, I think that that would be really smart for the UFC. But they
Uh-huh.
don't really put as much effort into that type of stuff anymore. And like the packages that they used to do like a really good job on, they're still pretty good, but they don't broadcast them in the same way. Like they make it a lot. They don't really hype it up in the set. Like for example, like when we put out a podcast or something, like the first thing it's going to be like on our social media with the link. Like the UFC, they do this one thing that I love for a lot of fight nights, and I think they did it for this one too. UFC Journey, and it's like a 30-minute thing where they follow like both fighters in the main event, and like they're good documentaries, but they like don't hype them up at all. Like they just post it on the UFC's YouTube channel, and again, like hardcore fans are gonna watch it if they're into that type of thing. But like I don't know how many casual fans are just gonna like go on the UFC's YouTube out of nowhere and pick that. You know what I mean? But I think if they hyped it up a little more, that would be a bit more interesting. What the UFC kind of does now, it's like you get to fight week, and wherever they're at, they have like one face off in front of, like, let's say they're in London, they go to like Big Ben and they face off in front of that. And like in Paris, it's the Eiffel Tower in the background. Like, oh wow, like one face off where they're in front of some cool thing. Like that's enough to get me hyped. Like for me, like like I said, I'm a fight fan at the end of the day. I just want to see two people get in the cage and just go after it. But
Yeah.
I do wish from a promotional aspect, like I think that they used to do such a better job than they do now, and now it just feels like a lot of the times they're phoning it in, and like we were saying in the beginning, like Jon Jones retired, and like obviously that's always going to be the bigger story, but like outside of really the main event and that one war that was on the card, there's just not too much to even really talk about, and it's I don't know. I don't know if it's because the if maybe like there aren't just any interesting storylines to work with right now, but at the same time we've lost the pay-per-view star completely. Like there aren't a lot of fighters nowadays who the UFC kind of like push in the way that they pushed Ronda Rousey or Conor McGregor, or even people like after that, like the Cody Garbrandts of the world or Alex Pereira, like people who are big stars like to the hardcores, and they kind of like saw that casual appeal and they kind of pushed them more. Now they don't really do that with anyone. Like, I think of the people who are up and coming nowadays, like Peyton Talbot is one that pops into my mind because like when I think of a blueprint of a fighter who would be like amazing to a casual audience, he's a cool dude. He's not like your average fighter, you know what I mean? Like he has interests outside of it. He was doing shit with Frank Ocean. I remember I saw that, and it's like the UFC doesn't take advantage of that at all.
There you
And
go.
like
That's the
they
point I'm
only
trying to
hype
make.
him up to like the true fan. Like the true fans, you know, like him because he's a pretty good fighter, and say what you will about him getting like fraud checked or whatever, but I don't think that was a fraud check. I think Barcelos is just really good. Um, but my whole point there, to go back to it, like I just think that they're almost wasting a lot of potential stars by not pushing them well enough. I mean, even Tom Aspinall, like we're gonna get into him. They just wasted 2 years of his prime. This is a guy who has the one of the most exciting styles in the sport. He's never gone past like what 10 minutes in a fight. And the thing is, like, he's just knocking everybody out or submitting them. And outside of the cage, he's good on the mic, and he has a great story too. And you just like we know it because we're fans, but like if I go down to like the grocery store and I ask someone who Tom Aspinall is, odds are they're not going to be able to tell me. And like it just it sucks because this is a guy who I feel like if this was maybe 5, 10 years ago, people probably would know who he is. Because like I remember back then, like you would know more fighters, but nowadays like it just they still kind of focus on these older ones and other fighters who aren't maybe like near the top and like they're losing. Like Cody Garbrandt, I would say is probably one of the biggest stars in the UFC, and like he's not even one of the better fighters in his division.
Mm-hmm.
Like people should know Song Yadong more than they know Cody Garbrandt, but they only push like one type of thing. I wish if they, but back in the past they used to do such a good job at pushing everybody, and I don't know if it's ESPN's fault or if it's the UFC's fault, if it's both, but yeah, the promotional side of it is definitely kind of fallen off, and it makes everything just feel a little duller. Like the fights are still good, the fighters are still awesome. It has nothing to do with that. It's just I don't know if it's like I said I don't know if it's too many cards, and that's kind of what makes it more difficult because how much time and resources can you really devote towards promoting one event when you have an event every single week? Like it's I do get it, like it is tough, but I don't know. I think that that's kind of dulled the product down a little bit, and I think if they had any competition whatsoever, I think maybe we wouldn't be getting it quite like this. Because in the past, like they were always better than Bellator, Strike Force, but they kept them like on their toes. Like that's the thing. Like they were under them, but they weren't like so far under them, kind of like the other promotions are now. And like the UFC doesn't even have to try that hard because they're so obviously the best promotion. Um, and part of that also is you have to say is you have to blame the other promoters too for not doing that good of a job because it's not like you can't have a number two behind the UFC. It's been done. So I don't know. It's a bit sad, but
When you've monopolized the sport as hard as you have, like the UFC, well, I want to say as hard as you have, and make it sound like, oh, like, dude, like it's not. It's not. Once you just said it, the other promoters should be doing a better job at promoting their promotion and valuing their fighters. But when you do have this stronghold that UFC has on the sport, it puts in a weird way, it does put even more added pressure in the sense that when your top star, your most, I would say, recognizable household, greatest of all time heavyweight champion, you need him to fight. Like just beyond the fact that there's an interim champion, and the fact that just the division needs to move forward. Like you need to still prove that you are worthy, and not just because you have the longevity and the roster. You need to still prove you're worthy of being this top dog, uh, this the monopoly that runs it all, by having a guy like Jon Jones, especially when, and here's how Francis Ngannou is now going to tie into the conversation as well, and how that fight never happened, especially when Francis Ngannou, a former heavyweight champion, who left the company when he was still the champion, had the gall to do that.
also Francis wasn't the one who was holding up the Jon Jones fight initially when
Yeah,
that was being talked about. So like, and now John all of a sudden wants to fight him. Like you know what I mean? Like, it's just. And it made the UFC look so bad too because I remember I made that video a few weeks ago when this was really dragging out pretty bad with Jones and Aspinall. Just kind of how, in my opinion, it's more the UFC's fault than it is Jon Jones because, you know, I get it. Like, I want to see Jon Jones fight Tom Aspinall. I think everybody did. But at the same time, his legacy is cement. Like, it's going to be there no matter what. And, like, I think that this kind of ruined the end of it. But I still, like, you can't take away. I literally wrote it down. Like, beat Cormier twice, Gustafsson twice, Shogun, Rampage, Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, Lyoto Machida, Chael Sonnen. And, like, there's more that I didn't even put. Like, because he beat, like, two different generations of light heavyweights. And then went up, when he won the heavyweight title, it was exciting because you're like, wow, like, he's really is the greatest of all time. Like, now you can't really dispute it, in my opinion. Unless you have a problem with the PED stuff, which, that's the case, then fine. But I think a lot of fighters are probably juiced up, so I don't really, I don't fault John for that as much as some people do. But I think that since he became champion, the UFC just did such a bad job at handling
that
it.
much is proven, and there are already people that are saying, nope, he can't be the GOAT when you have an interim champion that he straight up refused to fight. Well,
Yeah, I just don't. I don't agree
it's
with that.
already been proven, and it would have been. This wouldn't even be the debate if he had just beaten Stipe and retired, put the gloves down right there in the octagon, and just said, Aspinall's the interim champ. Fuck it, like I'm retiring the undisputed champion, but yeah, he's retiring the undisputed champion anyways. It's just all this baggage and whatnot that came with it to
8 months of
point.
just nonsense. Like it was
It
completely pointless, which is crazy. And part of that obviously lays on John, but the most of it, in my opinion, it goes on the UFC because they could have handled this immediately,
Yeah.
and
That's
they
goes
didn't.
that
So
tie exactly with the and how the UFC handled it. That ties into with how in a strange way, how I'm gonna look at it here. It puts even more added pressure on them to uh, it puts even more added pressure on them to really make these fights and meet these fights and truly prove each and every week why they are the top dog, why they're the best in the world. So when the most premier division in across all combat sports, in you have the greatest of all time holding that title,
and we
and
haven't had one heavyweight title fight this
it,
entire year, and we've only had
exactly,
one, I think, for the past five.
it
So
looks like a farce. It's almost like if you didn't know any better, uh, you would think the UFC just straight up, you would think they stripped someone else and Jon Jones just got the title put on him or something,
it's
you
just
know?
so weird though too because I don't get why they didn't want to handle it sooner because it's not like Tom Aspinall is like boring. You know what I mean? And it sucks. Like I hate that. The greatest of all time retired, and we're having this conversation. Like I'd much
It's
rather
pretty
talk about
sad,
this dude's
yeah.
career because me and you were talking before the show. Like Jon Jones, he's the one who really got me into MMA. Like him versus Daniel Cormier, like that rivalry was really like what kind of ignited that flame. And just people, especially the fans now, like the pandemic era fans, they really saw the tail end of Jon Jones's greatness, and it sucks for them because I see so many people because of how the UFC has handled this and how he's handled this the past 8 months. They just shit on John. I'm like, this is what I'm saying. He's the
Yeah.
greatest of all
And
time, and we have to talk about this. Like it
even then after
sucks.
the to curb stomp those people that might detract him because they didn't see the legend that was Jon Jones at light heavyweight. He goes up to heavyweight to really put the spotlight in, to really put the spotlight, all kinds of spotlight, a casual spotlight on him,
That was a
even
big
more
moment
so,
when he
like
beat Gon. That was a
really
huge moment.
exactly, really under a microscope, and he beats Cyril Gane the way he does. He destroys Cyril Gane by way of submission, just even more displaying that I can knock them out, I can beat them by unanimous decision, and I can submit them. And so that's how he goes about it with Cyril Gane. And then at that point, like even right then and there, the world is like just frozen. Like, dude, like this guy, he's the fucking man. Like he's the absolute GOAT of the sport. Like there's how many guys are you gonna see just
And he's getting the blame for this though, but it's the UFC because if you think about it, like they booked John versus Stipe initially, and nobody had a problem with it initially because at that point Aspinall hadn't won the interim title. Because we got to remember that only happened because that fight fell through, and then the UFC rebooked it. Why would they rebook it? They didn't have to rebook John versus Stipe. That was a dumb move. It's like they had an interim champion that they just ignored. It made no sense. Like, and I get that John, he's paid his dues for the company and he's earned like a super fight like that. But if you knew he wasn't gonna fight Aspinall anyway, then because that's wasn't John saying the whole time too? Like I've told the UFC what I want, and they just haven't said anything yet. And for all we know, he could have told them right after the Stipe fight that hey, I'm not fighting him. So strip me, do what you want. I don't really care, but like I'm not fighting him. Because that's
mm-hmm.
what, now that this has
Yeah,
happened, it makes me
it's a
feel
good
like well, that's
point.
probably what he did tell them. He's like I don't really. I don't know, because then you have Dana White saying that the fight was done, but like, what does that mean? Like, you, because if it was done, then why didn't it happen? But it's just, it's frustrating because, like I said, I'd rather sit here and talk about John's greatness, but instead, because of how him and the UFC have handled the final couple of
Like,
years now of his
how
career, it
could
sucks.
UFC employ Jon Jones for as long as they have and not think that his ego was ever gonna prevent him from just being like, all right, I'm gonna retire, I'm gonna vacate right now, and that's that. Like, he was going to milk this as long as he could. The guy's literal Twitter profile picture is a
Duck.
duck with the title around him. And he's like, ha 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 ha, like, yep, let me
And
just
he thinks
embrace
he thinks he's
it.
running laps, like he thinks everyone's loving this and nobody's loving it. Like he thinks this is like a heel move and that everybody is like on the bandwagon like, yeah, I'm so bad, right? Like everybody hating on me. It's all bullshit though. It's like, no, like everybody genuinely hates this.
Yeah, it's
They
tone
want to see the
deaf.
best fighters fight the best and you're literally wasting this guy's
It's like making
career.
a mockery out of it because he's done what he's done, and now it's just at the point like it's where it's like it's making a mockery of the sport, a mockery of the UFC, and that's why we're having this kind of conversation because we know that like this is it. This is the place to be. This is the place where everyone strives to make it in as a mixed martial artist, and it's almost like, well, shit, dude. It's like, I mean, if I got my chance at an interim belt, I have to be put on hold for 2 years in the prime of my career, coming back from a terrible knee injury, and I have to be put on like standby or something, just put on hold. I have to defend an interim belt because the actual champ just gets
They've
to
decided to
chill.
book him against a guy who, Stipe, who's great, but basically already retired when that fight was happening, and then retired officially right after it. So it's just it's unfortunate because, like I said, the UFC has kind of just derailed the final couple of years of John's career, and John had a role in that for sure. But
Like,
the
it
UFC could have done something about this.
just make notes because in the back of your mind, watching the Stipe and Jon Jones fight live, in the back of your mind, you're, at least for me, you're like, this is the last time I'm gonna see Jon Jones fight in a UFC cage. But nobody wanted to put that at the forefront. Nobody, because it was just about the fact that you have two legends just going at it for the belt to see who's better all time, and we got the answer, and that everyone was like, please Tom Aspinall next, but nobody wanted to actually come out and be like, yeah, that's Jon Jones' last fight. And that's it. We just watched Jon Jones' last fight
Yeah,
without even realizing it. So
it's just weird because, like I said, the fans nowadays, like I told you before, I saw like a comment that was kind of trashing John's light heavyweight run, which is like these people clearly like didn't watch that. Like because if you watched him beat all of those legends and the way that he was beating all of them, like he's so obviously the greatest of like it just bothers me because they have to disrespect him. And like I said, John played a role in that, but like the UFC is kind of the cause of it because they were the ones who made these. We were talking about how good their matchmaking is, but for Jon Jones, the matchmaking really just wasn't smart in his heavyweight run. And now we have the greatest of all time retiring, and instead of just giving him his flowers like I really want to do, and instead now we're talking about like what could have been at the end of his career and like how he might have ducked the interim champion.
what
But
could
again, the
have
UFC
been,
didn't help
even
that.
what already happened. Like if he just said in the cage, just put the gloves down right after Stipe win, just that's it. And essentially crown Tom Aspinall the champion. Like you never, still like you could be. You have Francis saying like I never lost the title. Jon Jones, and then Jon Jones is still gonna be able to say he never lost the title. It's just now it's that Tom Aspinall is actually on record saying he's going to retire Jon Jones without even fighting him.
Yeah, he actually
And
did.
that
He
that
actually
much
did.
has been 100% legitimized because if Jon Jones had just retired right after the Stipe fight, just be like, well, you know, Tom, you didn't actually really have to do anything. Now that we're here 8 months later, and Jon Jones is bombarded with Tom Aspinall questions, which has obviously played a huge role into why he's now officially retiring, because now he's not going to be asked about it anymore. Are you going to fight Tom Aspinall? Now that makes Tom Aspinall look like, yeah, no, he really did in a way play his part into forcing Jon Jones to retire.
And I
Because it's
wonder how
like,
much this will
where are
matter.
you gonna
Like,
go? Where are you gonna go now, John? What's there for you to do besides fight Time Aspinall? Nothing. We took the Stipe route already. You won. You finished him. You proved that you're still capable of
it would have
being.
been smart to just end it there.
That's
And
it.
like
It's because
go out
that's
on
it.
top like
Everyone's
that.
already saying you're the go heavyweight.
Like people still would have been talking about Tom
we as
Aspinall,
fight
but
fans are
not to
just
the.
selfish. We want to see you keep.
Well,
Nobody
that's not
wants
even
to
what
see
I
you
mean though.
retire.
It's just like when people are gonna look at his legacy years from now. Like I think if he would have just retired after the Stipe fight, people would like remember that the Tom Aspinall thing happened, but everybody would be like, nah, whatever. Like,
Everyone would. I think. Okay, everyone would be glad that. Okay, Tom's the undisputed champ. He probably has one or two more fights at by this point now, like defending the actual belt at this point.
Yeah.
And at this rate right now, Jon Jones is chilling. Like hopefully
That's
not.
what I mean. I don't think anyone would be
Hopefully
mad.
not in the headlines for all the wrong reasons,
Well,
like he has been in the past many
and
times.
again, literally right after right after he retired.
Oh my
It
god!
came out
It's
that he's getting charges.
exactly,
Come on,
dude. It's
man.
like, bro,
This
it's
guy.
like, congrats, man. You're the greatest mixed martial artist just about anybody's ever witnessed. But at what cost at this point?
It just sucks because, like I said, I think if he would have just walked away after the Stipe fight,
There's
Tom
so
becomes
many
the champ.
skeletons in that closet.
Well,
It
I don't
just
even
keeps
care about
going.
any of that. I don't factor personal matters into him being the greatest of all time. I mean, Michael Jordan wasn't exactly the greatest of all people when he was doing on his run in the Bulls or with the Bulls. But like the thing with John is, like I said, I think that people would be talking about this a lot less if he would have just walked away after Stipe. Because then, like you just said, Aspinall probably would have gotten another couple of fights in there, and the heavyweight division would be active at the top. But instead, they prolonged this for another 8 months, and then now John retires, and then Aspinall is now the UFC heavyweight champion, undisputed. And it just makes John look bad because now you kind of have to remember that when you look at his career as a whole, you're like, yeah, his run at light heavyweight is probably the greatest title run that we've ever seen and probably will ever see when you factor in like the people he was beating and how young he was when he was beating them. It's just now when you look at his heavyweight era, you can't really take anything away from the Surreal Gone win, but then after that you're kind of just like, well, he kind of just put the heavyweight division in limbo for the next 2 years after that. And it sucks because, like I said, I'd rather talk about how great John is, but instead we're kind of sitting here now, like wondering why the UFC prolonged this in the way that they did, and why they couldn't have come to this conclusion way sooner.
It's necessary. That's the way this needs to be talked about, and we'd be doing a disservice to our channel and our viewers and anyone that's really taking a true what should I say? I should say like just a true attention to, even if you're not tapped into the UFC every week. Just, hey, like, whoa, Jon Jones, like, I know that guy, like, that dude kicked ass in the 2010s, like,
Even like think about any other sport. Like when LeBron James retires, we're not going to be talking about how the NBA fumbled the final few years of his career. Like, you know what I mean? That's just not a story. Like that doesn't happen in other sports.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy because this is so clearly like the most talented fighter that's ever stepped foot into a cage, and his career kind of putters out like this in the end, partially because of his own doing and partially because of the UFC. But yeah, I mean, what a weekend. That's really all I could say. What a weekend.
Yeah, that was pretty.
Oh,
that was a doozy.
I will say this though. Next week's pay-per-view, this is a fun one. I'm excited for that.
The pay-per-view is absolutely stacked, and to circle it back to the start of this pot, I need UFC to really put a freaking, especially now that okay, you have a true undisputed champion now, someone who's actually active and is going to fight regularly, and the whole Jon
He'll
Jones thing's behind. They really have to push this card super hard, like, because you have such good fights and such good fighters, such big implications. Make it feel special.
I mean, this is International Fight Week. The main event is absolute insanity. Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira. I mean, two of the most exciting
That's right.
fighters on the
It's
roster.
finally International Fight Week as well, you know?
Yeah, and it just feels like a normal pay-per-view fight week, which is like
Exactly.
good, but also, again, like when they used to have International Fight Week in the past, like when Jon Jones was in his prime, Ronda Rousey was around, Conor McGregor was around, the fights all felt so much bigger, and this fight feels big to us. But again, like I don't know how many casuals are maybe, but
This is
because
the
Oliveira
kind
is
of
pretty
card
popular.
that can get casuals to be
Yeah,
hooked.
they really should push it heavily because
Yeah.
this is such a good one. Like I said, Topuria versus Oliveira, Pantoja versus Cara France. That's a really good fight. Beneil Dariush versus Hanato Moicano. Super excited to see Joshua Van get an opportunity against Brandon Royval since Manel Cape had to pull out of that fight. That's a really fun. There's a bunch of other good fights when I was reading it the
There's
other
so
day.
and just they don't have the storyline excuse for this either. 'Cause
Peyton
there's-
Talbot's back. Let's talk about him.
Peyton Talbot's on the
Here we go.
prelims.
Here we go.
Peyton Talbot's on the fucking prelim. That's insane. Like there's so much they can center around for this card. There's so much storylines. There's so much build to it already.
Jack Hermanson versus Gregory Rodriguez. That's a good fight.
Like just
Casey Cortez back.
exactly. Just use it. Showcase all of it.
I think no matter what, this is going to be a really awesome card, though. Whether they hype it up like that or not, but I think the stylistic matchups on this one are going to be nuts.
We hardcore fans are going to be well fed.
Yeah, that's what we have to say too, because
This
I
is
feel
the
like
kind of card that can just really get real people together. Like UFC 300, for instance, like that's the kind of card, that magnitude of that card. It just created the most historic, viral, memorable moments you will ever get out of the sport and just out of sports in general. That's what we want. UFC has all the potential to be at the forefront, the center of, especially nowadays. Like the NBA Finals is about to wrap up. MLB is in mid June. I know of a 162 game season. There's not a whole lot to be rivaled with right now. Like UFC has all the potential to be that
and this is
talk of the
also-
town.
It's also the most exciting sport in the world.
Yeah.
I will die on that cross. Like,
Like exactly, dude. Like when people hear the word fight, Dana White has the quote. This quote is in the UFC gym I go to, and it's up there. I can't tell it word for word, but no, I think I can. It's by Dana White, and it's just fighting. It's in our DNA. Like everybody
I
gets
know.
up for a fight no matter what, and just yes, it can get ugly, and it can get gory, and people will be turned away from that. But when you see two guys just trying to take each other's heads off for all the glory, for all the just the money and the legacy, the fame, all of it. They will do whatever it takes within the confines, of course. Like we're not trying to see people biting ears,
I don't want to see UFC like one type rules.
Yeah,
But I don't know, like
that's it. At the end of the day, the sport, it's so freaking unique. It's so just mesmerizing that
it should be promoted as such.
exactly
That's it.
anybody can get into it and just appreciate. Like I may not be the biggest fan of MMA, but that was pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, well, literally, we're last pay-per-view, UFC 316. I mean, we were watching with a bunch of people who really never watched UFC before, and they all had a good time. It's like, if you can get people to watch the cards, like, everybody likes the product. It has nothing to do with the fights itself. That's where everybody, like, because anyone who tries to make the argument that we're making, they're like, you guys are just casuals and nerds. Like, you guys want WWE storylines. And we're like, no, we want the fighters to be showcased like they deserve to be. Like, yeah, it's great that me and you know that this person is really good. It would be even better if someone, like, who isn't a big MMA fan knew they were good. Like, even if you don't watch basketball, you know who LeBron James is.
Yeah.
It's just like, I wish that UFC fighters would have that same type of like credit from the mainstream public. And again, I think there's always going to be a cap on any combat sports because there's just some people who don't enjoy watching that stuff like that. But there's still, it's a worldwide sport. There's so much potential, and I just feel like lately it's been a little dull. But this pay-per-view coming up is one of these cards that it's impossible to feel dull because there's just so many good fights on it. And this main event has two really exciting fighters, and that's what I kind of want to end on because like, we say all this, but we're talking about the business. We're not talking about the sport. Those are two different things. Like, MMA is still awesome. These fights are still awesome. These fighters are still awesome. But the promotional side of it lately, I think, has been lacking. And at least for the fight nights.
And the sport will just only continue to evolve. It will only continue to evolve. It will become even more and more of a chess match. And the athletes themselves, already the physical specimens that they are, they will get even more freaking just unbelievably athletically gifted. So yeah.
I love it. Like, this episode has been tough love on the UFC, but I still love the UFC, man. And like I said, cards this weekend are the reason why. And I hope casual fans check this one out too, and I hope it gets hyped up well enough that a lot of people will watch it, even outside of like the hardcores, because this is going to be a treat. I can't wait to even talk about it next week, man. But yeah, that's all I got for today. I don't know about you, but I think we pretty much tied a bow on all that. So until next week, UFC 317. Can't wait to break that one down for you guys. So see y'all. Easy guess. Hey, local.